Welcome to the Pathways to Success. I'm Julian Placino, recruiting professional turned success speaker, show host, and media entrepreneur. This show is dedicated to helping you find your unique pathway to success by having conversations that educate, inspire, and transform. Together, we'll interview some of the world's greatest leaders and uncover their secrets to success. Thanks for tuning in, and on to the show. Welcome to episode 214 of the Pathways to Success, where we have conversations with inspiring leaders about their business and keys to success. I'm Julian Placino, your host, and we have yet another great show in store for you today. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the Pathways to Success, Lawrence King, CEO at Headstorm. Lawrence, welcome back to the Pathways to Success. How are you, man?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me back again. I was surprised that you got me back. I didn't know if I did a good job last time or not.
you were really awesome, and I'm excited to catch back up. So we are now in November and closing out Q4 of 2021. Catch us up. How has the business been? How have you been?
It's been fantastic. You know, I'll start with myself only because I think that probably is a little bit better starting place. I think it's been, personally, it's been great. We have, I didn't know if I told you, but I have 3 daughters. They're all, school is going much better now than it was last year with all the COVID stuff. So they're now on a regimen, which allows me to get back on a regimen with the company. The company's doing great. Employees are doing well. Business is doing fantastic. And so it's a relief to get back to a place like this where it was sort of pre-COVID, right, and to continue the growth and the great stuff that we were doing then. So it's really been fantastic.
Yeah. That's really, really great to hear. And much of what we're going to be discussing today is advice for software engineers, because
It's a crazy candidate market right now, and we're all about adding value and guiding people to their pathway to success. And you've obviously had an incredible career in terms of your software engineering career to entrepreneurship. And you're also doing some very unique things at Headstorm, which are helping engineers grow and advance their careers. And I'm excited to unpack that.
Yeah, I'm excited to unpack it with you.
All right. So for those who are tuning in who haven't heard of Headstorm before, just briefly, what is Headstorm?
Sure. So Headstorm is I like to think of us as an elite, but we're elite product and engineering firm. And so we help companies navigate the digital space. And so if they come to us with product ideas, we'll help bring those to life from a product perspective and take them through the product methodology. Then when it comes to execution, we will show them how to build software. And so you're in a different way. You hear the word agile a lot of times. And that's great, but really our internal processes and some of the secret sauce behind this is how we operate. And that's been, a big differentiator for us. So we come in and we help them think of what they want, the next great idea that they want to build, and then we help them execute on it.
And who is your ideal customer? Who do you do this for?
So we do it for typically, that's an interesting question. And this is for any of the young entrepreneurs out there. You start and you evolve. In the beginning, you're kind of taking anyone that will listen to you and pay you money to do, to work your craft. Mm-hmm. And if, towards then you kind of start thinking about, okay, I didn't like this type of client. I want to try a different type of client, or maybe go up the food chains in terms of company size or client size. Mm-hmm. And so now we're at a space where we're doing, a large part of our clients, or we have Fortune 500s, Fortune 1000s. We have some Fortune 2000 mid-market. And then on the startup side, we also work with startups, but there's a little bit of a criteria there. They've had to have a Series A of 10 million or more.
Gotcha.
And so that's sort of the profile of clients that we work with.
Gotcha. I want to go a layer deeper as far as the why behind Headstorm. What would you say is the mission or purpose of Headstorm? Why does it exist?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you, from our vision statement, it's really to create a culture that delivers profound impacts to clients and humanity at large. Mm-hmm. And really where that emanated was from grassroots. I started as an engineer, mm-hmm. and I got to experience working for different companies as an engineer. And I've always had such a great admiration for both engineers and designers, and really any practitioners within the technical space. And what I saw coming up the ranks, and this is over the last 15 years, I didn't think that developers or the technical practitioners were maximizing their value in a way, or being recognized for the tremendous horsepower, brain power that they have. And so you hear, there's an old saying that they used to say about developers, always drove me nuts. They'd say, listen, just put them in lock them in a closet, feed them pizza underneath the door, and they'll crank things out. And I hated that. Right? I didn't want to be thought of it that way, and I know that a lot of my peers didn't want to be thought of that way. And so really coming up with a culture that nurtures engineers and their superpowers of being highly analytical and problem solvers, and then also on the designer side being big creatives, was really the aspiration. And so I wanted to be able to create a framework that spoke to developers and spoke to designers, that offered them, career advancement and opportunity that I didn't see otherwise was available to them, or articulated in a way that you could rely on.
And that is why I thought it was so interesting about what you were doing, because it really was engineering focused. And I want to begin to sort of unpack that now, right? And I think this is all evidence now from my own personal experience, having met with a few of the folks on your team. So shout out to Vic, to Hop, to Norman, to Divya, to Matt, and also to Miss AL. Having had the conversation with you all really gave me some great insights of what you guys are doing uniquely different. So let's begin with that. So if there was a kind of a career promise that you could make to software engineers to come to work for Headstorm, what would you say that career promise was?
It's really about, providing a culture that can really maximize and allow them to flourish. Right. And everything built, or at least the mechanics of that culture was built around engineering first or design first. A lot of companies, and case studies that I've read about successful consulting firms like ourselves, started with business folks. And it's to the idea of, hey, let's go find folks with business degrees, and then we'll teach them how to code, because they already have the soft skills and the emotional intelligence to be able to have client conversations. And to me, I thought, you know what, that's not obviously not what we're doing. That's what I'm trying to fight against out in the world. So why don't we take engineers first and then pivot it on its head and teach them the consulting skills and all the soft skills and the leadership skills and the coaching, and turn them into consultants, rather than trying to find that in the beginning and then teach them engineering. And the idea behind that is really that a lot of the folks, if they're passionate about engineering, they're going to do really good work. So if they're going to do really good work, the idea of delivery, or we won't have any delivery issues, that's sort of solved for. So then it's more of a relationship with the client and being able to present and handle objections and doing all of the other soft skills that becomes important. And so it's really about starting with engineers first and then teaching them this consulting, rather than starting with business folks first and then teaching them engineering.
Yeah. So it really feels like it's about building a well-rounded technology executive. So let me frame this question, since I have now some personal experience with your company. I want you to think about Hop, I want you to think about Michael Vick, and I want you to think about Norman. And I want you to think about what they were at the beginning of their career at Headstorm and now where they are now. What would you say was the biggest transformation they experienced having gone through your methodology?
Yeah, I think there's lots of experiences. I think in the beginning, I think acceptance was a big thing, right? All of them super smart, highly analytical. And then it's more about, okay, now that and passionate, right? That was those are sort of the key characteristics that I saw when we started. And now they've got a lot more confidence. They've had a roadmap to be able to say, hey, I know that I'm good technically, and I know how I can focus and grow in the technical areas. But what does it mean to be an executive, and what type of characteristics does somebody exhibit to be effective at being an executive? And so a lot of that they've been able to follow. We have this expectations framework we'll get into later. But a lot of that they've followed, and they've grown in tremendous ways. Instead of being sort of obtuse shaped and highly technical, they're really well-rounded now, and they're better communicators, they're better teachers. I mean, certainly better teachers. They do an amazing job of taking, both, some of our younger folks and our senior folks, and being able to teach them really complex concepts in a simplified way that sticks, so they can learn. And they're now, I think, they're certainly staples of our culture and our company. And, a lot of the younger folks anchor to that. They're giving back now that same sort of guidance and mentorship that's so important when you come out only being technical.
Right. I want to share some observations that really kind of add on to what you're mentioning. I for sure know that they were well-rounded engineers, but it also kind of drew out more of who they were and created some specialty in their areas of interest. Like Hop seems like the real technical mastery, like really engineering architect kind of guy, right? Michael Vick struck me as the charismatic sort of leader, kind of what you would think, oh man, I hope he doesn't take any offense to this, like Craig Federighi at Apple. He kind of reminds me of him, right?
I can see that, yep.
And Norman, also technically brilliant. He's like really, he holds the culture in his hands. He's so passionate about it, right? So well-rounded, but still bringing about their interest in making them grow into something like amazingly beautiful and unique.
Right. Yes. Yes.
So let's talk about some of the specifics of how you create growth and advancement with your engineers. The first piece is the expectations framework. What is this? Right.
So a little bit of a backstory behind this. So when I started the company, we actually started the company to build a product called Appquity. And we were going to fund it with consulting dollars. Well, the consulting took off, and in fact, we haven't even gotten a chance to do the product, which was the purpose, the genesis behind it. But we got to a size of about 10 people. And I realized that, in order to scale this any bigger, I had to go get a mentor or somebody to guide me, because I had no idea about how to do this. I knew I could lead people, but I had to have a point and a destination to lead them, and how to think all the things that you need in order to get them there. And I found a guy named Rene Larave, fantastic mentor. I'd like to think of him as sort of the godfather of the regional consulting firms in this space. And he agreed to be my advisor. And the first thing he did is, okay, now that I'm your advisor one, now you need to create an advisory board, and you need somebody to hold you accountable. I thought, okay. And then he says, and you need to create an expectations framework. At that time, I'm like, what's an expectations framework? And he says, well, you need to clearly articulate what your expectations of your employees are. Just like they're going to have expectations of you, you need to have expectations of them. And when you have clear expectations, that's really what builds a strong relationship. And so I said, okay. And I started researching these expectations frameworks, and I couldn't find anything out there. And then I researched competency matrices, and it took me down a whole nother path. And so I really kind of sat back and thought, okay, I know that we've got 6 different levels that you get promoted in Headstorm. And so I said, okay, how am I going to measure all 6 levels? And I thought, all right, well, I need to have some competencies that really measure kind of what we want this to become in the end. What's my vision of a successful executive? What is my vision of being a successful architect? And I started there. And so I created about 19, or there's 20 expectations, and they're basically grouped into 5 categories. And those 5 categories is talk about your role as a professional, your role as an evangelist, your role as a leader, your role as an innovator, and lastly, your role as a technician. So of the 5 groups of competencies, technician is only one. But in my mind, I thought, man, this is everything. This will help explain to people how do I get from point A to point B? How do I grow from a consultant to a partner in the firm? And everybody's held by the same measuring stick. So what's interesting about this is that partners don't have any more or less expectations than consultants. We're all measured by those same 5 buckets of competencies. They just evolve differently over time. In the beginning, it's more about being an individual contributor and doing a good job and delighting your client. And that evolves into being able to teach others, being able to teach teams of teams, then becoming, growing eminence and more capabilities as a partner, becomes more networking and less individual contributorship. But this maturity really lines out a complete career path for the things that you need to focus on at each level in order to be promoted. And it took me about 6 months. And at the time I thought, man, I'm going to do this, Renee, but I'm busy. It was weird. 10 people. I'm busy selling, doing, collecting, invoice, doing the invoicing. And there were so many things. But he said, trust me, you need to have this if you want to scale. And I'm so glad that I took that advice, because our culture is now really anchored around this expectations framework.
So what would you say is the main key benefit for engineers to go through the expectations framework?
Well, in a sentence, you can, the promise is that you can be a CEO or a CTO or an executive to get through this thing. Once you get through this, that's the aspiration. And so that's sort of the high level aspiration. But one of the more important parts of this is that it's reliable and it's transparent. And I know that, I started my career, my early career as a lawyer, and there was this idea of a discretionary bonus. And I hated that, because it was discretionary, and no one knew how you got paid the bonus, and how much the bonus was at that time. And I thought, well, if I create a company, I don't want to have that. I want to have transparency. And so this is a way for, at each level, focus on these things in this column for this year, focus on the next column, the successive year. And so it's very transparent, and it creates a meritocracy. So it's not people are in charge of their own destiny. They know how you really get in what you put into it, or get out what you put into it. And so that I liked. It was empowering. People had power and transparency and reliability with their career path.
And that is what I liked about it also. It was clear, and it was definitive, and for the most part now, in its maturity, it feels pretty much proven. Like, you do these things. The one thing that I've seen is that whatever you put into your career at Headstorm is you will definitively get back out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So something also that I know grows an engineer is the variety of projects and technology, for all the reasons that we can discuss. But tell us more about that at Headstorm.
Yeah. So part of growing as a firm, and this really comes down to our differentiation. There's a lot of consulting firms out there that what they end up doing is sort of what we call staff aug. And it's an order-taking mindset, where it's like, you tell me what to write or build and I'll build it for you. And that never resonated with me. And I did it a bunch, and I always found out that what I was building, the clients didn't put much thought into themselves. And so you end up building the wrong thing, and that's not a success for anybody. And so we really take pride in being able to do our research and have enough experience and technical know-how to be telling the companies and the clients who are paying us really good money what to do. And so when we are able to do that and we can transition into that type of engagement with clients, now we have a really good working model for our employees to be able to come in and participate in each of these projects with each of these clients and get real expertise. And it's not just technical. We are always asking our employees and training them to ask the why behind what you're building. And let's make sure that we've talked about that and we haven't ended up somewhere and spent a lot of money building something that didn't produce value. And so they get a little bit of a lot of exposure to the business case in terms of the why, and then they get a lot of training and experience in the how of how are we going to build this and how are we going to build an app that fits within the business constraints of what they're asking and produces the value that we're promising. And that's a hard balance because, you know, in the engineering world, with an unlimited budget, you can really build anything. You could build the Taj Mahal. But that's the easy path, and it's not what companies need. And a lot of times when we're working with startups, it's about building the minimum viable product. What is right? What's the minimal thing that we can go out and validate with the market, get feedback back, and does what we built or architected, is it expandable? Will it evolve over time into something that's scalable so you're not going back and having to scrap, throw away any code and start over again? It's about evolving, and that's the challenge in engineering and architecture that we're really passionate about and we're teaching. How do we evolve over time, knowing that you can't just come out? No company has the budget or the wherewithal to go build the Taj Mahal. And many times by the time you get done building the Taj Mahal, you don't need the Taj Mahal anymore. They've pivoted. The business and the market say that they need something else. And so this is about the most lean, effective way to deliver software that we've come up with.
So it's not just about banging out code, it's about solving business problems with technology.
Exactly.
So I've met a lot of full stack engineers at Headstorm. What consists of that full stack? What are the technologies that you guys utilize?
Many technologies. So when we think about, let's go back to the expectations framework. So when we think about your role as a technician, you're really measured in 3 areas. You're measured on the breadth of technology, the depth of technology, and then the mechanics of the of the process itself. So think about source control and monitoring, and some of the architectural components fall into that. And so for our consultants, when we say full stack, you know, they may start in one language. It may be a product that we're building in C#. It may be that we've done the technology selection and found out that Scala may be a good fit, or Java, or we might be writing Python. We vary between probably 6 different languages. And so each project, and the expectation of our developers is listen, nobody can become a technology snob in one area and do only that one technology. You have to be willing to take what you've learned in this technology and translate it into a different language, because that's perhaps what the best project is for the client. This can be a risk in a lot of times because, you know, you've got one firm that says, hey, we're going to recommend doing this in Microsoft or C#. And that may not be the best fit for the client, but if it's the only thing that you know how to do, of course you're going to pitch that. Where working with us, our consultants are getting trained on all of that. And so that breadth of capabilities brings a tremendous value to our clients, and it also gives a lot of opportunity and exposure to our employees to be able to bring in new languages. You know, if there's some new and cool languages out there that they want to talk about and discuss, you know, we give them a platform to do that and to test and experiment. And then if it's something that we feel is reliable enough to recommend to a client, then we consider doing that as well. So there's a lot of broad variety that they get exposed to.
So let's speak about that. You mentioned you have given engineers autonomy to bring forth ideas, and there seems to be kind of a culture built around that. So tell us more about your learning community and culture.
Yeah, love it. So one of the things that we started out early on doing was what we're calling SIG. So they're special interest groups. And this works in 2 ways. It's really beneficial for a company. So on the one hand, you've got passionate developers and designers and technical folks that want to be able to experiment. They want to be able to experiment with their friends and share ideas. And so we have what we call special interest groups or SIGs that allow them to do that. So they come and they put together a little application that says, hey, what are the outcomes that you want to get out of this SIG, and what's going to be the budget for the SIG, and do you have some initial members that are interested in doing it? And if those criteria are met, then we go ahead and fund that SIG, and now they've got a group that they can hold meetings and experiment and do different things with new technologies. And so it helps them and us stay at the tip of the spear in terms of what's coming up out there. So they're constantly incubating in all of these SIGs. On the other hand, when it comes to at the executive level, you sort of become removed. And believe me, I started as a developer, and I remember the engineering piece, and I'm passionate about that. But over time, I'm less hands-on keyboard, right? And so it really is helpful because they'll do presentations at our Headstorm Universities on their learnings from the SIGs, and it keeps all of our executives in touch with the latest and greatest technologies. And so as we see things that may have promise or may have applicability with a potential client or an existing client, then we will graduate those SIGs into something a little bit more formal incubator that we call Quantum Orange. And Quantum Orange is a group within Headstorm that is really passionate about taking products to market. And so that's where we infuse the business with the engineering. So the engineering concepts and technologies will start in the SIGs, and then we will prove them out from a business case in Quantum Orange. If there's a match, if we have a technology and we've got a business case that supports it with market fit, then we progress it into a product service offering that we offer to our clients. So it's a self-feeding mechanism that it creates win-win situations for the company and for our employees.
Have you already experienced a success story with that model?
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely. We've got, right now we have slots for 4 go-to-market service offerings. We have one that is what we call XDO, which is Extreme DevOps, and it's a very innovative way of delivering testing in production to companies. And then our second one that we just went to Chicago, part of being in Quantum Orange is that every 6 months we take the Quantum Orange team to a city, and they pick the city. And so this year they said, you know what? We want to go to Chicago. So we create a trip to Chicago. We go to great dinners and went out had dinner on a boat. And then went to some museums. And then part of that is 4 hours of that time, of those 3 days, is what we dedicate to work. The other time is play. And so for those 4 hours, we really hustle to come up with innovative ideas that we've already been incubating in the SIGs and really bounce them off of business cases and try to figure out if there's a match. And so that's a really cool event that we get to participate with our employees on, and sort of a play hard, work hard mindset. And that's where a lot of the good ideas come from.
And it seems like a way to really give ownership to the engineer, like, hey, look, it's this idea that we made together and it's now part of the business offering. I think that's incredible. So I heard the SIGs, the special interest groups, Quantum Orange. How does that all work with Headstorm University? How are those different?
So Headstorm University is a platform within Headstorm. And what it is some of the other competencies, when we think about being a professional, what does it mean to be a professional, one of the expectations? And that's about, if you have a great idea, you need to be able to pitch the idea and communicate it in a way that is easily understandable by an audience. And a lot of times you have to handle objections. It's not like when you pitch an idea, everybody's going to be like, yep, we love it. In the real world, you'll pitch an idea and you'll get pushback. Clients may have their architecture teams or their product teams. And so being able to defend those ideas in a professional, diplomatic way is really important. Being able to articulate those ideas on a slide and create sort of a slide deck, something that's condensed that really resonates and hits hard. Those are all skills that are part of being a professional within the expectations framework. Headstorm University is a safe space to be able to present those ideas. And so every Friday we get together, we have breakfast catered, and we're streaming live between our different offices locations. And we have a huge backlog of consultants that have either ideas that they've worked on in SIGs or ideas they've come up with on their own or learnings and experiences that they want to share. And so they put it into a deck and then they present on it. And so they're getting constant repetition in a safe space so that when they do go to a client, they've got some of that muscle memory there.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And I know one other feature to how you really grow engineers and help them in advance is you assign everyone a mentor.
Right.
Is that correct? What is that process like?
Yeah, so that's our mentor-mentee program, and really it serves a couple different goals. One is we want constant feedback. Right? Sometimes what we do can be challenging a lot of times. And if there's, positive feedback, we want to hear about it. If there's negative feedback, we want to hear about it. But it's an individual that you can talk to that's typically one removed, so maybe a peer or somebody that's sort of we're pretty flat in our organizational structure, but somebody with more experience with Headstorm you'd be assigned to as your mentor. And they can provide a lot of guidance, a lot of career guidance, because they've been working with the expectations framework for several years now, and they can help provide that guidance, provide sources for areas of where you can find some knowledge about particular areas, and then they can always bubble the feedback up that they receive there up to the leadership team, so we can be able to react to that and be able to make sure that we're constantly learning and improving.
Gotcha. So Lawrence, before we close with your personal career tips, what else should anyone watching, any software engineers who are considering Headstorm as a potential place to apply, what else should they know about why it's great to work at Headstorm?
Wow, there are so many ways, so many things that I would say here, but I would condense it to think of, if you really want to be with a team and build camaraderie and solve some really tough challenges and work hard and play hard and feel rewarded for that and feel like you have transparency, that you make an impact, we're your home, hands down. I think that the way that our leadership is structured, the different processes and the different the quantum oranges and the SIGs, all of that is set up so that our developers have a platform. They have a platform to experiment. They have a platform to pitch. They have a platform to manage and lead from, and they have a platform to evangelize from. I mean, in fact, we even we like to get them into interviews like this for them to be able to talk probably a little bit more in depth about some of the technology issues and challenges. But it's all about giving them a platform, because at the end of the day, in my opinion, leaders create platforms. And if you want them to lead, you need to start giving them a platform early so they can get familiar with it, so they understand how to build a network, and they understand how do I guide and coach others, and how do I really start kind of giving back. And so it's all about that platform.
Awesome. So Lawrence, let's close with your personal tips to build your career as a software engineer. And I think you're such an interesting use case, because like you said, you revert back to being an engineer and now having done all this. So something you're passionate is about, and you've actually built the expectations framework around this, is working on professional competencies, not just the technical. So make the case then to the engineer who thinks all they need to do is write awesome code. Why should they care about this?
Right. Well, I'll give you my experience. Mm-hmm. I spent 16 hours a day passionately, not because I had to, coding. And what I learned is that my social skills, your brain will rewire. It will optimize against the activities that you're putting it against. So if you're super analytical and you're spending your time in front of a keyboard and coding, your brain's going to rewire in a way that optimizes against that, and it's going to use less resources to perhaps go out and socialize with others and do some of the coaching, the evangelism, and being able to maintain relationships. Part of being a professional is really maintaining and fostering relationships. And I experienced that, and I thought, man, I've had a harder time going out and speaking publicly since I went super deep into coding. And so it's really, I think the first thing is get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And what does that mean? It means, listen, you're an engineer and you can always work on your engineering capabilities, but understand that at some point you may get capped out, and as what we would call an individual contributor in your career. And any company is only going to compensate an individual contributor for so much. In order to break through that glass ceiling, you really have to start focusing on becoming a leader, becoming a mentor, becoming more professional, start evangelizing yourself and your own capabilities. And that requires practice. And so practice in those areas, still focus on coding, but put more emphasis on building your well-rounded capabilities so that you can break through that glass ceiling and become an executive or whatever your heart desires at that point. You can really rule the world with all of those tools.
So you have, let's say, an engineer right now who is not fully convinced but wants to take a small step. What's a simple, easy step that they can do next to begin to build that professional competency?
Wow, let's see. I would, I would create a pitch deck for myself. Developers tend to have they have a very strong opinion on the value of what you write. I know I did. I would write something and I thought, this is the coolest thing. And then I would go out in the world and I would try to sell it, and I didn't speak about it in a way that necessarily landed, or more importantly, I wasn't able to connect the business value to the technology offering that I was trying to offer. And so early on, when I was pitching to VCs for other products that I'd done in the past, I would pitch it to myself first. And what did that mean? It meant that I would start and I would say, hey, these are all the benefits. And when I went through this list of benefits for whatever, it might have been a personal project that I was doing or something at work, I would realize that they were so technology focused that when I pitched them out there, they landed with a thud. And so I really started focusing on, okay, what does it mean for the business? And I would start working on that, and I would just put together a little slide to prove to myself that I could pitch it. And that just got me thinking outside of the technical aspects and more onto the business aspects. And that kind of opened and broadened my aperture at the time. And I think that's a kind of an easy way just to pitch it back to yourself in a non-technical way.
I think that's one of the best pieces of advice I think I've ever heard, because engineers, when they write their own stuff, they're so passionate about it and protective about it, right? But you must bring forth that idea and therefore forced to be developed these other skills, right? I think that's an awesome tip, Lawrence.
So I was going to tell you, three, the two more that I would say is, the second one is really start with the end in mind. And what do I mean by that is you have to be intentional with your career. This is an important thing. And so if you think, and I know they said this in college to us, they said it when, maybe perhaps your parents said it in high school, where do you want to be in 3 years? And that was such a cliche question I hated asking. But as I've gotten older and more mature in my careers, I realized this is a really important consideration. The reason it's important is because you're going to spend a lot of time doing something. And if it's doing lots of different things, you may not be able to harvest the value out of that. And it's not until you really get intentional and think about, where do I want to spend my time? If it takes 10,000 hours to be good at something, I want to make sure that I've thought about where and how I'm spending that 10,000 hours. And so I'd like to frame that up as, hey, where do you see yourself just in your mind in 3 years? Like when you kind of like, when you're sitting there and sort of fast, coming up with where you want to be, you really need to take that passion that you have and say, okay, well, if that's sort of how I envision myself in 3 years, how am I going to get there? I know that's what's going to make me happy. It's probably in line with my values. How am I going to get there? And that's the important thing. And am I doing things that are going to get me there? If that is an architect, I want to be an architect in 3 years. Are you doing the behaviors that you see a professional or professional architect doing? Are you emulating those behaviors? And so starting with the end in mind. The third thing is get a mentor. I know that when I started and I had a mentor early on with Renee, you need somebody to hold you accountable. By nature, we don't hold ourselves accountable very well. And so, if I was left to my own devices, I love video games. I would play the hell out of Warcraft or something. Yeah. And I know that about myself. So you got to kind of create these brain hacks to say, listen, I need somebody to hold me accountable. And that's what a mentor is going to do. And so even if it's somebody at work, even if it's a family member, all you need to do is basically, hey, articulate your goals. I would like to do this or be here in this time frame. These are the things I'm going to do. Can you just hold me accountable to these? Even if it's that you meet with me for 10 or 15 minutes every week or every other week, just let me recite what I'm doing just to prove to somebody beyond my own self that I'm accomplishing what I set out to do.
Those are incredible tips. And I have two follow-up questions because I want to make them actionable, right? You said get a mentor, right? And if you're not working at Headstorm and you're out there, you're wanting to build your career, how do you get a mentor?
Yeah, I think that, find somebody that is in the spot or they're passionate with you. It doesn't have to necessarily be somebody that's senior to you with more experience. It could be one, if you're excited about a new technology, find somebody else that's excited about that technology and hold yourselves accountable. So it could kind of be peer accountability. It could be finding somebody on LinkedIn that's already been there and asking them for help. I can't tell you, one of the fallacies of being an entrepreneur, and this is super important, and I think a lot of people suffer from this because I did. It's a little bit of the imposter syndrome. I have to know everything, right? That's sort of what the idea is that you have to know everything before you go out. You can't be vulnerable, and that is absolutely not the case. That's how I took it the first year, and I found myself being more isolated. I was afraid to reach out because I don't know anything. I don't know as much as that person. And if I talk to them and I don't know everything, maybe I'm an imposter. And that is a challenge, an obstacle in your own brain that you have to get over, because once I started being vulnerable, it becomes a superpower. Wow. Now when I go out on topics that I don't know, I clearly say if I don't know something, I don't know it. And what happens is the person that you say you don't know something, perhaps that's their expertise, they're so willing to share with you, and all of a sudden I'm saving so much research because I have an expert just telling me everything that they know about a topic. And you just can't get that unless you start reaching out on LinkedIn or something. So I tell people where it's at, and I say, listen, I don't know that much about this, but I would love to. And they start sharing with you, and there's communities out there, and all of us, there's not one person that knows everything. And once I got rid of that, my relationships, my network grew, the dialogue and conversations I had were more authentic and more meaningful. And so that was a big unlock for me that I'd like to share with others who may be experiencing that.
Can I say just how powerful I think it is what you just said? Lawrence King, CEO at Headstorm, admitting to be vulnerable and not knowing everything, and actually being okay with not knowing everything, and how that has transformed your career. I think that is a huge key point. Thank you for sharing that. I want to close with one final point, and it is a follow-up to your second point, which is build your career roadmap, right? You said always begin with the end in mind. And I think that makes sense, but how does someone who doesn't have full clarity on who they want to be yet in software engineering begin to craft that vision? How do you honestly take inventory of who you are and what you want? Where do you start with that?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I certainly didn't know. But then it's like you need to go one level deeper.
Okay.
And you start asking your questions, and this gets back to a book that I'm super fond of, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Mm-hmm. And in that book, they put you in this thought experiment where it's like, pretend you're observing your funeral. You've died, and what do you want people to say about you? And when you start thinking about things like that way, it really starts kind of helping you understand what your values are. Once you understand what your values are, now you can start constructing how the things that your activities, some of your objectives, you can start bringing those into focus, because they're going to have to center around those values. And once you do that, then there's another order of goals and achievements that you want to go after that will start coming into focus. But if it's not focused out here, become even more introspective and align yourself around your values. Eventually you'll find something that is stable and not just something that is here for the moment and gone the next. And that's where you can get into trouble, because if you base your goals and achievements on things that are maybe trendy at the moment, that doesn't last, and you may pivot careers again. So you just keep going introspectively into yourself to get to your values, and then build out from there. And that's sort of the inside-out mindset. Mm-hmm.
And you are living evidence of what you just described.
You try, right?
Right.
Nobody. It's a lot like meditation. No one is successful at it, but it's the exercising it and the trying it that is what's meaningful.
Right. Lawrence, this has been incredibly helpful. I want to be able to make a call to action on behalf of Headstorm. Headstorm is hiring, so please.
Yes, we are.
Tell us, how do we learn more about the job postings, connect with you personally? Tell us all that.
Absolutely. Feel free. I'm on LinkedIn. Lawrence King, for CEO of Headstorm. If you search for that, you'll definitely find me on LinkedIn. Reach out to our website. If you hit us up on the Contact Us channel, or we have job postings on our website, please hit us up out there. We're really hiring in basically all roles right now, and we would love to talk with you. Our process is a really, really good one. We've gotten a ton of feedback. The candidates that have come through, this is how I know that our process is effective. When you've got candidates that perhaps didn't make it, they didn't get an offer, they come to us and they say that we learned a ton. We love the company. Thank you so much. We've learned our next steps for some of the gaps that we had. Now we have things to work on and come back to you. That's a win. A lot of the times when we come in and we'll interview candidates, we walk them through. It's like we want the relationship with that candidate. And if part of that relationship is hey, it's probably not a fit right now because we'd like to see you work on those things, but come back to us. We can help you. We can help give you some resources to be able to help grow in those things, but come back to us. That's what is really a compassionate recruiting process that I love about it. And so coming into the process, I promise will be valuable regardless of the outcome.
The world would be a better place if everyone took that approach. I can promise that, Lawrence. So thank you very much for that. We'll make sure to have all that contact information in the show notes as well. So thank you, Lawrence, for being on the show once again.
Thank you for having me, Julian. It's a real pleasure being on here. Thank you.
And everyone else, thank you all for tuning in to another episode of the Pathways to Success. As always, make sure to subscribe, comment, and share. And we'll see you next time on the next episode of the Pathways to Success.